visits to Vietnam. When I edited the Daily Telegraph, I felt able to deploy 17 staff on coverage of the 1991 First Gulf War, 6 of them in the theatre of operations in the Middle East. We took for granted our budget as well as our duty to cover the war in depth, as did every other major news organization of that era. Today, that sort of money is simply not available. Even such lavishly funded newspapers as the Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, feel obliged to cut back global operations to reduce losses. Thus we were, though we didn't then know it, a privileged generation of foreign correspondents and explicitly war reporters. I was among the youngest and deferred to the many of my colleagues who'd witnessed and in some cases fought in the Second World War, like Daily Telegraph military correspondent Sheriff Thompson, who commanded 1st Airborne Division's guns at Arnhem in 1944. I still blush to remember my embarrassment one day during the 1973 Yom Kippur War when I dived for cover as a Syrian jet streaked overhead, only to behold Sheriff still chatting away, unmoved, either physically or, apparently, emotionally. Far more journalists have been killed reporting from war zones since 1990, initially in the Balkans and most recently in Gaza, than perished in my day, even allowing for the relatively heavy casualties in Indochina. This is partly because reporters attend conflicts in much larger numbers, partly because wars involving non-state actors, such as were the Balkan conflicts, are inherently more chaotic and dangerous. Finally, because many belligerents no longer much care whether they kill journalists or not. It's become extremely difficult for reporters to gain access to the front in Ukraine, of course from Russia, but likewise from the Ukrainian side. The rival armies seek to shield from view their military secrets and losses. They permit a few reporters to travel beyond the rear areas only under closely controlled conditions. Moreover, while journalist courage is never in doubt, there are few who display the knowledge to perform informed military analysis from Kiev. Most of the real insights into the state of the conflict are written and read in Western capitals, among writers with access to armed forces or intelligence sources. The same is true in Gaza and the West Bank, where the Israeli High Command shields from critical scrutiny the conduct of the IDF. I've often observed that war reporting is like doing a jigsaw puzzle with most of the pieces missing. It's unlikely that any of the belligerents will tell an outsider, even of their own nation, the whole truth about what's going on, about what their forces are or are not achieving. Many Western reporters served in Afghanistan between 2002 and 2019, but it was only years afterwards, following leaks from inside the armies, that reliable information emerged, and prosecutions for war crimes, for excesses carried out by several nations' special forces, including those of Britain, were instituted. It's not realistic to imagine that war correspondents can ever be permitted to accompany those carrying out operations at the sharp end in any conflict. But it might be useful for journalists who dearly love, as I did myself, I must say ruefully, to describe one's own experiences under fire, to also frankly avow the limits of their knowledge and access so that readers can assess the value of their words. Since the millennium, I've several times visited Iraq and Afghanistan with one or other of our armed forces chiefs of staff, experiences that were helpful in informing my analyses of what was taking place for various newspapers. By traveling with the brass, of course, I did not again become a war correspondent. I was merely a privileged, middle-aged